All right, let's cook. Let's cook. We are back in the Garden of Eden. And so worshipers, not true students of Afroo Oonoo, but worshipers of Afroo Oonoo, we need you to bring sound right reasoning to this Garden of Eden story. So piggybacking off my last video, who is Re Akh Ptahs, let's continue on. Now, as we know, it says, listen to reason. Let's take a look at the setting of the Garden of Eden, the Garden in Eden, Africa and Asia, 6,000 years ago. Pantheism, not Nuwaupu, not Noon, but we know there are Nuwaupians on the planet still adhering to Nuwaupu because there's millions of people and different races on the planet, right? According to the Biae. So this is Introductions to the Nature of Nature, Book 2. And you can see within the parentheses, it says, including Sabaism, right? Now, as I stated before, first of all, let me say this, disclaimer, this is not a disrespect to Afroo Oonoo, but we got to expose those who try to be exposers, okay? I told them they should have put the information together. They should have put these 2 9 sciences together, but for attention and clout and trying to be leaders and not proper teachers, some have jumped off the porch a little too early, right? And they're jumping back on the porch to get a little bit more understanding from the OGs. Okay. Now, one particular worshiper said Re Akh Ptahs is the Pharaoh Namer. I cleared that up. But we want to go here, right? Because we want to talk about the sexual pleasures and desires that fell upon the Hindus, the priests and nuns that were under Re Akh Ptahs, King Amenubi in the Garden of Eden, right? So if you look down at this bottom paragraph on top of 174, it says, some leading adherents, like priests and nuns of King Amenubi, the reincarnation of the sun god Re Akh Ptahs, were required to maintain celibacy, abstinence from marriage, and sexual pleasures similar to that of the Roman Catholic priests and nuns of today at this writing. Abstinence from sexual pleasures for the sake of morality and public well-being. Let it be remembered always and be known. Can you give us a breakdown of what the setting of the Garden of Eden looked like? But we're going to get past 174. It gives more breakdowns of the sun god, right? You got many breakdowns and descriptions of the sun god in the introduction to the nature of nature. We want to get down here, though. Adam of the Garden of Eden was not one man, but a group of Phoenician and East Indian priests. And Eve thereof was not one woman, but a group of Phoenician and East Indian nuns, all sworn to celibacy, similar to the Roman Catholic priests. Now, one worshiper said that Doc made Adam and Eve a singularity and not a plurality, and because of that, he's not following the BIAE. I'm going to show you that the master teacher has always been following the BIAE and the 9 ball, and Afroo Oonoo brought his own particular science. Okay. But like I said, we're going to talk about the sexual pleasures and what happened in the Garden of Eden based on Mercury and Hermes, the moon god Sin, the legendary messenger of the gods. Now, check this out. It says the Caduceus plotted, well, the serpent god Set. I'm at 175. The serpent god Set, as shown by his attribute, the Caduceus, plotted with the earth god Dagon and the underworld god Pluto, indeed, to make Caucasian man. Okay. Now, as I instilled, Caucasians were not originally white people, but there are some black people who hold the spirit of the moon god, and so they are disagreeables. Okay. They do anything for attention and to be seen, even when they don't need to be seen. But this is not the point. The point is this: what happened in the Garden of Eden that brought on these sexual pleasures and desires. It says the moon god Sin, same as the god Mercury, symbolizing the Caduceus. Oh, I don't know why he didn't put Thoth in here based on what he said about Thoth. The Caduceus, and represented by members of the Mongolian race. So we went from the Phoenician to the East Indian and into the Mongolian race. Persuaded Eve, the nuns, to do or indeed use Spanish fly. This is not in the Biae, right? And so we need the worshipers of Afroo Oonoo to clear this up. Cantharides, this word is definitely not in the Biae. Aphrodisiacs is not in the Biae. Potent sex stimulants. In fact, if you've read the Biae, this is not why Eve's womanhood was excited. Okay. It tells you the womanhood of Eve was excited by the spirit force of Leviathan, right? So Spanish fly, cantharides, aphrodisiacs, potent sex stimulants. It says at the bottom, okay, after it breaks down the connection of Sin and Sinai and Sino, Eve, the nuns, now having powerful sex urges all the time because of the potent sex stimulants. So I assume they was drugging up on the sexual stimulants, right? Persuaded Adam, the priest, to have sexual intercourse with them by giving the priest the same kind of sex stimulants in their food. Now we know this is drawing from the Bible story, the Garden of Eden in Genesis, the Bible story. So the sex stimulants, the apple, right? The fruit from the tree has been exchanged for sexual stimulants. Now, this is very important right here, right? Because they looked over this. It says Adam did participate with Eve in the carnal knowledge of the tree of good and evil, which was forbidden by the celibacy commandments of the sun god Re Akh, right? King Amenubi, who was the reincarnation of the god Re Akh, King Amenubi does not connect the Namer. If you look up King Amenubi today in Google, right, it's going to take you to Hammurabi. Hammurabi, according to the sciences, can be linked to Melchizedek, right? Knew what had occurred by spirit and mental telepathy, as well as having been told that the priests and nuns is in the back of the school getting busy. Okay, they getting busy all the time. And he did visit the temples of Ptah. Look up the temples of Ptah, right? Look at the rulership in the temples of Ptah, the father of all, for verification and confirmation. Now look, King Amenubi and many of his Sabaeus helpers were members of the Ethiopian race, let it be known. So what was the setting and the spiritual science in the Garden of Eden? It wasn't Nuwaupu, right? It wasn't Noon science. It was pantheism and Sabaeism. And y'all think pantheism is some type of negative science when at that time that was the science. Okay. Just like Christianity, right, is the premier religious philosophy in America and pretty much across the world, we are still dealing with our sun science philosophy. Okay. It hasn't been buried. So as it is now, it was then. All right. So King Amenubi and many of his Sabaeus helpers were members of the Ethiopian race. All right. So let's look at the bottom of the screen. Now, this is where Ray Harakti and the Biae should have been spoken of, like I said, but it's not. All right. So this video is we're talking about the Aphrodisiacs. The Aphrodisiacs. Let's read again. Who were Adam and Eve by race and religion? Adam and Eve were Hindu East Indian and their religion was Hinduism. We must understand that name plurality is a key to understanding the Bible. Now, remember, you said that Doc only spoke of Adam and Eve as a single individual group, not even a group, as single individuals. Adam was not one man, but a branch of the Hindu people. The female of that branch is called Eve in the Bible. So this is pulling from the Bible. Okay. You said that Afroo Oonoo is pulling from the Biae. He is not. He was not able to produce the Biae in book 3, right? But what Afroo Oonoo imparted in the Garden of Eden is not in the Biae. We can see this right now. Okay. Adam and Eve were the first men and women of this world, meaning the first people of the moon cycle. That is, the first people converted to the moon god's way of life. An ancient name of the moon and moon god is Sin. Some of the information is similar, but it's not the same. The moon cycle, the Sin cycle, began approximately 6,000 years ago. Okay. The moon cycle did, right? There were millions of people of other races on planet Earth when Adam and Eve were ousted from the Garden of Eden, Africa, and Asia and sent to the Aegean Islands. Was pantheism and Sabaeism only being practiced in the Garden of Eden, or was that the sciences of the time? Okay. Let's get further clarity. Now, this is where the sex stimulants, like I said in the first paragraph, Ray Harakti should have been spoken about. And in this paragraph, we should see cantharides, we should see sex stimulants, we should see aphrodisiacs, etc. Let's check and see what excited Eve's womanhood. Who was the serpent and how did it beguile Eve? The serpent was Leviathan, a giant sex and spirit force who is able to control peoples and nations by sex and by spirit generated from what? Generated from blood and the waters of the earth. That means it was already in them. And we're gonna see why, right? Leviathan, who has many spirit members and parts distributed throughout the earth, was cast from the sun approximately what time? 6,000 years ago? 5,000 years ago? 15,000 years ago? No. 17,250,000 years ago, Leviathan is on the planet. And what is Leviathan? A giant sex and spirit force. Just before the evolutionary cycle began. Okay. Now look, it says the moon cycle is the climax of the evolutionary cycle. The serpent Leviathan is the moon god Sin, who hypnotized, okay, who hypnotized Eve and excited her womanhood. Is the hypnotizing, the giving of the cantharides and the aphrodisiacs? If you agree with that, then show us, right? But its forces, and in turn, by its forces, and in turn, Eve excited Adam's manhood. There's no food being talked about in here or anything like that. Don't go outside the book. Don't go outside the book. Stay in the book, okay, and break this down. So, is the Biae and the story of the Garden of Eden in the introduction to the nature of nature, is it exactly the same? It's not. So how can you front on Doc, right? Because Doc stayed close to the Biae, and he stayed close to what the Bible said, okay? And they had sexual intercourse, which was forbidden by the laws of the sun god because Adam and Eve were priests and nuns. What was the results of breaking the commandment laws of the sun god? Notice there is no name given in here of who the sun god is, because there are many representations of the sun god as stated, right? And so the sun god had the priests and the nuns had to bounce to the Aegean Islands, right? And then the Canes came back 1,000 years later. Okay. So we got that. Now, here's where we check on Doc. We're gonna go back to a book that was in public distribution before anybody knew who Afroo Oonoo was, right? And when the books of Afroo Oonoo hit the scene, this is why the worshipers of Afroo Oonoo today thought Afroo Oonoo was Doc. Because who else could they compare the works to? What does that say? Doc was putting out the work. Let's look at this. Boom. Y'all remember these $5 scrolls? Y'all remember back in the day, you know what I'm saying? When you was able to get a dime sack, a scroll, and some Wendy's. That's how I was getting down back in the day when I was like 19. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm gonna go through pieces of this. This is called Breaking the Spell. This is a book, the scroll, Breaking the Spell. Okay. And it says, and all of his kind who are able to learn, understand, and accept universal knowledge and facts as disclosed by nine ether will also be given the same connections and powers for realization and maintenance of liberty, justice, equality, rightness, and survival beyond Armageddon. The scroll was in circulation before any introduction to the nature of nature. If you're seeking knowledge, reading was out in public distribution. They might have been sitting in the A and B bookstores, really dusty until Nine Ether sent you Melanites into the store to get the books. But what was in circulation? These scrolls. Okay. The war of the showdown between right and wrong. Nine Ether, the spirit, second paragraph. Nine Ether, the spirit of Ethiopians, represents life, and of course, life and death are opposites, just as Ethiopians and the Canaanites are opposites. Let's continue on. The purpose of anything and everything written in these scrolls is to help destroy the Negro. negative and slave mentality says the same thing in the BIAE. So that woolly haired people everywhere may have and exercise free mind and equal mind, not participate in the equal money system, but have equal mind and thereby enjoy freedom and equality. Because if a person has a free mind, he will do free things. That sounds like the nine ball. Okay. Afroo Oonoo said he was going to produce the BIAE and didn't even give you none of it. Right Knowledge series are designed to open the way to a spiritual and mental revolution because there can be no change in racial status for Nubians as a whole without first having change in mental powers. It says that in the nine ball. What if you didn't have the nine ball? Uh-oh. What if you didn't have the BIAE? Uh-oh. Remember, worshiper, you didn't have it. It wasn't in your possession. It was given to you. It was sitting in the house, like the introductions to the nature of nature was sitting in A&B bookstore on Tefnut's bookshelf. Every time you looked at them scrolls worshiping Doc, you overlooked the BIAE and nine ball, and your spirit didn't even tell you to pick those books up. See, when I worked when I managed and worked in a bookstore in England, All Eyes on Egypt bookstore, people used to come in and ask me, what book should I start with? You know what I said? I said the same thing that Doc said. Go look at the covers, and then when your God senses start blinking on and off, that's the book that you start with. I can't tell you what book to start with, right? Everybody is on their own individual journeys. Let's continue. Because there can be no change in racial status for Nubians as a whole without first having change in mental powers and spiritual forces. The same old spirit forces and same old minds will maintain the same old system, although the ways and means of maintaining the old system may change. You might say that that's making way for new science. And I say, if that's the case, that's why the sciences should have been put together. That's what I said, right? And that's the right thing to do with this non-science information. Change in mental status by right knowledge, wisdom, and understanding brings changes in spiritual status because right knowledge destroys ignorance in the mind. Then the spirit forces of ignorance that maintain ignorance have nothing to live on and they die, scatter, or become sealed in the earth. Let's continue to go down. Okay. Now, you said Doc because he was Melchizedek. He was a pantheist and all of that stuff, and he's going against sound right reasoning. Well, he covered himself by saying that he was bringing schools. He wanted to give you something that people wasn't ready for it, and so he went through the schools. That's what he should have did as a priest. That's what he should have did, right? And I can't say what he should have did. He did what he was supposed to do because where were black people's minds in the time of Doc being on the scene? Y'all want to talk about he went to jail and blah, 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 blah. Nigga, if you ain't been in jail one time for a weekend or whatever, nigga, then you must be out here like a Uncle Tom. A lot of real folks, male and females in the black community, done been to jail, been close to it, or did something that could have got them locked up, but the Most High and the spiritual forces may have shown favor, right? But then you checked yourself, you learned, and then you stopped doing the bullshit. Okay. Let's go down to this. I'm about to wrap it up. I'm about to wrap it up. But in order to wrap it up, I got to go back to the Bible interpretations. And let me set this up. We got to go all the way down to the bottom. Because there's Nuwaupu. with the positive Nupu. I mean, with the um, even letters, not the odd letters, the even letters. You see Nuwaupu spelled like that, right? We're gonna go all the way down. Excuse me, people. Okay. Now look at the question. Nuwaupu is pronounced Nuwaupu. The meaning of the word Nuwaupu is the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. I got another question for you. Afroo Oonoo states that Nupu has to be spelled in odd letters. 1, 2, 3, right? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7, or 9. Okay. Now, if you see the pronunciation, because this is where Nupu comes from, it's pronounced and spelled with even letters. The writers of the nine ball, their surname, when Afroo Oonoo said you should take on Nupu as a surname, they didn't spell it in odd letters. Now, how do you see that and then say somebody wrote that book, but they not following what they said originally, nigga, like you doing? You see what I'm saying? Like exactly like you're doing. You said something originally, you terminated that, you found yourself like an evangelist, and then you came back under new names and shit like that, thinking that that was gonna get rid of what you put on your spirit log in the ethers. You must have thought, right, that I'm some type of man worshiper and that your publicity should be held a secret. See, when you was talking to me, you was talking to a G. I'm not a flea. Never been a flea. You must think so. And this is why I'm breaking all into your mind right now, robbing your mind right now, stealing all your neurons and stuff like that, right? Okay. Now, let's go back to the page. Let's go back to the page. Let's go back to 1967. Okay. 1967. You got to peep the climate. Peep the climate. Was people ready for this type of information? You know what this information would have had us do back then? Was challenge the system mentally, but we challenged the system physically. We was ready to die and shed blood under Leviathan. And sometimes we don't have a problem with shedding blood if it's gonna revolutionize and change some shit up. But this information is stating that we don't have to shed blood no more, that we gotta use our minds. And the fact that we don't want to use our minds creatively is a part of the spell. You would think after 30, 40 years, niggas would just get it, know who our enemies is, and know what we supposed to do for self and kind. But see, if we got a lot of niggas out there like you, then there's a lot of separation that's gonna be on the planet with a lot of stagnation and the no growth in the mind and creativity. You understand what I'm saying? Let's peep this out. It says the meaning of the word Nuwaupu is the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. What's the next sentence? Afroo Oonoo wrote this, remember? Nuwaupu is all knowledge, all wisdom, all understanding, finite and infinite. He couldn't have wrote that. He must think we fools, okay? He must think we the fool if he wrote that, right? And then he changed it, and then we go back and he wrote this, and we don't call him on this, okay? You can't say, nigga, he just changed it in 1973 because he wanted to. Shut up. Check this out. Nuwaupu is the science of sciences and the science in sciences. So Nuwaupu is in noon science. Is that not correct? Right? You can't replace all Afroo Oonoo did was put noon science right there. Nuwaupu is the spiritual science that existed before the great flood of Noah 17,250,000 years ago. It said that in the Biae. Therefore, the science of the original creative forces. Why would I put noon science in there? I could put Nuwaupu in there. If he would have just left it at Nuwaupu, but Nuwaupu was what? 9 ether. Okay? So when you're dealing with Nuwaupu, you're dealing with 9 ether. So Nuwaupu rides along with Nuwaupu. But how do we put, if I just said, hey, Nuwaupu and noon science, here, do something with that. If I said Nuwaupu and Nuwaupu, do something with that, you can at least say they sound the same, similar, right? Let's continue. Use common sense, man. It's not that deep. It's really not that deep. You got to have a little bit of comprehension, though. And the original spiritual science of the African pygmies and Ethiopians in general. So King Amenubi and his Sabaeans helpers were Nuwaupians. Do you get that? You probably not putting together like that, right? You know what I'm saying? Nuwaupu is the science in which and with which the universe was grown. So when he says that, we need real science. Like black, why are black people black? Well, do you see this genetic code behind me? That's not up there trying to be deep, nigga. That's science. You see that? You melanin? That's science. Okay. So if you talking to a black person and they're like, hey, we're black because of the sun. Hey, we're black because of carbon. Hey, we're black because of, and you don't know that that's where this comes from. Plus, what I got next to it, the DNA. The DNA and the eumelanin is the same elements, the L's, right? Doc said when you're dealing with the L's, you're dealing with the Phoenician science. Aren't you Consu Ray L Bay? So, nigga, you more of a Phoenician than anybody. Because you said that was your legal name change. You didn't say that was a given name. You said you went to the white man and you registered yourself as Consu Ray Elbeck. And who got those paperworks first? The white man. Okay. Come on, man. New okay. Nuwaupu existed for a long time after the flood, but finally gave way to pantheism. Now, with that, right? Boom. Let's jump back. Afroo Oonoo, book 2. Let's jump back into the setting of the Garden of Eden. Right there. Right there. Let's take a look at the setting of the Garden of Eden 6,000 years ago. Pantheism, including Sabaism, was the ruling spiritual science. King Amenubi and his Sabai's friends. Boom, let's go back. Let's go back. Because what time is it? This is where I'm going to end it. Just as in accord with the time cycles of nature, pantheism eventually gave way to religion as we know it today. What time is it now? What time is it now? It's time for Nuwaupu, but it's time for Nuwaupu again. What is Nuwaupu? What black people do naturally. Black people always give they already give reverence to the Most High. Black people already give reverence to the spiritual angelic beings and the creative forces of nature. We already do that. We are born like this. We give reverence to our ancestors. When the times and conditions are right, black people will pull together like one major organism. Okay. Black people are a part of the electromagnetic forces and radiation, atmospheric forces on this planet. Just like the sun, if the sun disintegrated tomorrow, everything would disintegrate with it. If black people, all black people fell off this planet, okay, the straight haired mankind races would die immediately. You may not get that though. Facts are identified by proof, logic, reason, because facts are always logical and they reason out. You know what I'm tired of seeing you doing? You bringing up these plagiarized works and you're changing the information to suit your point of view. And you got people thinking that these are the original books. Nigga, you're not a writer. Okay, you're a plagiarizer. So my people, if you watching this guy's videos and he put up information that's bulleted, that's him changing the information. That's you don't even need this nigga to learn 9 science. Okay. You need to be able to exist as a black person like a son. We are already born. We are already mentally equipped. We already have the spirit of melanin. That's what sun heat genes are. That's why our hair is the way it is. Okay. And so you a sucker MC for trying to go against Doc and trying to pit these sciences against each other because you worship the moon god. The moon god is all in you. So to end it, when all necessary and major questions about the Bible have been asked by, answered for, and known to, and understood by the so-called Negro, he and she will then be qualified for his and her own spiritual science, which is what? Nuwaupu. Okay? So Doc ends with, therefore, salvation comes after liberation and is the maintenance and perpetuation of liberty, justice, equality, and rightness like the other scrolls. This scroll helps to open the prison gate that has your minds locked in. And as the gate of mental confinement opens, ignorance will flee and right knowledge, wisdom, and overstanding will become the keeper of your minds. Right knowledge, wisdom, and overstanding are Nuwaupu, and Nuwaupu is the spiritual science of all woolly-haired peoples throughout the boundless universes on any planet that holds this melanin code, right? Any planet that's just like Earth, millions of planets throughout the universe, Nuwaupu is the science. With that being said, clear up your incorrect information, falsehood, and errors, right? I'm dealing with the transgressions. Grand Kush, y'all hold it down. Peace.